Tillie Klimek was born in 1876 and given the nickname Tillie, a misleadingly cheerful title for a woman who would eventually be attributed with the deaths of over 20 people. As she clumsily blossomed into adulthood, Tillie would entertain and astound those around her by predicting fantastic events. Beginning in 1911, she would tell any neighbor who would listen that she dreamed of the deaths of various dogs around her. Often, these dreams would surround the idea that death would befall the dogs who had been a bother to her or her property. To the shock and horror of those around her, these dreams were prophetic in nature, and soon the bodies of dogs were showing up in Tillie's wake. Once killing the beloved pets of her neighbors proved ineffective at satiating her murderous thirst, Tillie moved on to humans, more specifically, those closest to her, the ones who would agree to be bonded with her until death, and did so without knowing that their own death was just around the corner. She first married John McKiwis in 1895. In 1914, Tillie's first husband would die due to what the coroner would deem heart troubles. After John's death, Tillie joined a matchmaking service that specialized in connecting women with Polish gentlemen. While the promise of matrimonial bliss was attractive to many, only 3 months after she was first matched with John Ruskowski, she predicted his death. Just like with her first husband, after the death of her spouse, she was able to collect a sizable life insurance payout and was able to move on with financial freedom. She used her newly acquired funds to pay for the matchmaking service again and set her sights this time on Frank Cups. Despite the fact that Tillie had buried her 2 prior husbands, Frank didn't have any apprehensions and married Tillie, while unbeknownst to him, all of his predecessors had died at the hands of their beloved. After the marriage to her 3rd husband, Tillie picked up a new hobby, candy making. And it seemed that whenever she bumped heads with her neighbors or those throughout the village, she would end up making up with them and giving them a gift of candy, which would eventually sicken them. Again, despite the outward evidence, no one was suspicious, and Tillie continued to roam free like the murderous and wild animal she was becoming, unchecked and uninvestigated. Along the way, many relatives of Tillie would pass, often to an advantageous end for Tillie, as she was usually in their wills and benefited financially from their untimely deaths. Her new husband, Frank, lasted 4 years, but finally, in 1921, Tillie would tire of her candy-making predilections and would decide it was time for him to go as well, and she unceremoniously predicted Frank's death. Tillie told neighbors that, according to her dreams, Frank, quote, would not live long, and, quote, had 2 inches to live. In the next few weeks, upon awakening, Frank would see that Tillie was already sitting next to him, with a solemn look on her face, and in hushed tones, she would tell him things like, quote, your time is almost here, and would even knit her future mourning hat, a head covering Polish women would traditionally wear at funerals, in front of the very man she was planning on mourning. She even went as far as to purchase a coffin ahead of time, which had been heavily discounted, and asked her landlord for permission to store the coffin in the basement until it was time for its inevitable use. After Frank's death, soon enough, Tillie was married again, this time to husband number 4. She'd also met this husband through the same Polish matchmaking service that she had worked with in the past. The proprietors of this matchmaking service continued to take Tillie's ill-begotten money despite her suspicious and deadly past. Her 4th husband, named Joseph Klimek, was the first to be informed of the possible danger of being married to Tillie, as rumors were starting to spread throughout the village that anyone who crossed her would face an untimely death. When he too died shortly after the wedding, doctors were already suspicious, and his body was tested for arsenic. The results came back positive. This revelation caused officers to begin the process of exhuming the bodies of her previous husbands, and investigators found arsenic in their systems as well. At that time, rat poison containing arsenic was readily available, as all one needed to do was ask the pharmacist at the local drugstore for some with the complaint of rats overtaking the house. The poison that Tillie had asked her cousin to purchase for her was called Rough on Rats, and was tasteless, odorless, and easy to slip into any meal or hot beverage. Arsenic poisoning is a gruesome and violent way to die, as it causes horrific gastrointestinal pain as the body desperately tries to empty itself of the poison, but to no avail, as it is absorbed into the bloodstream. When given in small quantities and over an extended period of time, the buildup of symptoms would mimic the myriad of actual diseases which would commonly befall citizens of the 20th century, and which would eventually cause death. Early into the scientific process of forensic technology, in order to gauge if the victim had been poisoned by arsenic, doctors would cut out a piece of the victim's stomach and cook it on a fire. If the organ smelled of garlic, the medical examiner would come to the scientific conclusion that arsenic poisoning was the cause of death. No garlic smell, no arsenic. Testing for arsenic poisoning got better and better as time went on, and eventually the bones of victims could be tested using a mixture of chemicals that would detect the traces of the poison. Tillie's modus operandi would be to slowly poison her victims by putting the arsenic in their meals in small quantities. Upon her arrest in 1921, Tillie told the arresting officer, quote, "The next one I want to cook a dinner for is you." Tillie wore the mourning hat that she had prophetically knitted in front of her third husband to her trial. Both her and her cousin, who had assisted in the procurement of the poison, were arrested and put in prison for the many murders. While incarcerated together, it is said that Tillie mentally tortured and tormented her cousin Nellie by frequently predicting her own demise. In one instance, she told her cousin that the guards would be hanging her in the prison yard the very next day. This was untrue and just another manifestation of Tillie's desperate need to cause others pain and suffering. On November 20th, 1936, Tillie died alone in her prison cell of natural causes at the age of 60. Mary Elizabeth Wilson is known in the annals of history as the Merry Widow of Windy Nook. Targeting the men who deigned to marry her, her method of killing her victims was beetle poisoning. Born Mary Elizabeth Cassidy on June 11, 1889, in Catchgate, Stanley, County Durham, she wed her first husband, John Knowles, in November of 1914. After moving into a home in Windy Nook, Gateshead, the couple elicited the attention of gossipy neighbors when her longtime lover, John Russell, was allowed to move into the couple's marital home and live with them, despite the fact that Russell was having an affair with Mary. In 1955, Mary's first husband, Knowles, passed away, and 5 months after her husband's death, she would marry her affair partner, Russell. Russell would die a bit over 1 year later, in the winter of 1956 or early 1957. Just as with Knowles, Mary inherited the estate of Russell, which was estimated at £43, or £1,471 in today's money. In June of 1957, a mere 6 months after her second husband's death, Wilson would marry her third husband, Oliver Leonard, who was an estate agent that was retired. Less than 2 weeks after their wedding, Leonard would pass away. While he died merely 12 days into their marriage, the entirety of his estate went to his bereaved and newlywed wife, which included a lump sum of £50, which is equivalent to about £1,200 in modern times. The upbeat and light-hearted manner in which Mary approached her numerous husbands' untimely deaths elicited the attention of those in her neighborhood. Gossip swirled after many saw her actions and affect as inappropriate after the deaths of her husbands, and many in attendance at one of the funerals of her husbands discussed how Mary was hardly the mourning widow that one would expect to encounter. After the death of one of her husbands, Mary made a tactless joke at his funeral, in which she asked the undertaker for a discount on future husbands. Mary cheerfully went about hosting the funeral of her third husband and glibly said that the leftover food would still be in its edible window when it came time for the new groom's inevitable funeral, and that they may as well save the wedding sandwiches for the groom's wake. After Leonard's death, the consummate widow would soon marry her fourth husband, Ernest Wilson, who survived his tenure as Mary's doting husband for less than 1 year before his untimely passing. Wilson's estate was the largest Mary had inherited yet. Her nefarious acts netted her £100, roughly £2,500 now factoring in inflation, or 3,300 American dollars, as well as an English bungalow with an additional life insurance payout. After he passed, Mary neglected to even attend his funeral. After her fourth husband died, police wisened up and preserved his body for autopsy and further testing. Based on their findings from autopsy, they exhumed the body of Mary's third husband and tested it for traces of poisons or other artifacts of foul play. They found high levels of phosphorus in both victims. And throughout the two trials in 1956 and 1957, the merry widow of Windy Nook was finally tried for her crimes and ultimately was convicted for the deaths of 2 of her 4 husbands. After these crimes were unearthed, police went back even further into Mary's past and exhumed the bodies of husbands number 1 and 2. These remains also contained similar levels of phosphorus, indicative of death by the ingestion of insect poisoning, specifically the kind used to treat pestilential beetles. However, as Mary was already put away for life for the first 2 murders, the prosecutorial office chose not to have another trial. Imprisoned at H.M. Prison Holloway in Holloway, London, Mary was sentenced to death, but eventually her sentence was commuted to life in prison due to her elderly state. It is unknown if her lack of a death sentence could have been circumvented with the addition of 2 more murder charges from husband numbers 1 and 2. While she was married 4 times and for the majority of her adult life, she never had any children and has no biological descendants. In 1963, Mary passed away in prison at the age of around 74.